Lord Scriven.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the Midland Mainline Enhancements Programme will extend electrification from Bedford to Kettering and, subject to design, Market Harborough. Further to this, HS2 Phase 2B will electrify the line from Clay Cross to Sheffield. The Department for Transport has taken the decision not to extend electrification beyond this and instead deliver new bi-mode trains for intercity services. This will mean passengers benefit from faster journeys, more seats and better quality trains.
Could I welcome the noble lady, the Minister, to her new post and wish her well? However, the Royal Institute of Mechanical Engineers and the Rail Industry Association both point out that particularly hydrogen bimodal trains, which are looked to be piloted on this line, can't go over 87 miles an hour. They cost more over the lifespan of electrification, and the capacity for storage means that they're not suitable for high-speed, long-distance railway trains. Why are they wrong and the Department correct?
I'd like to thank the noble Lord for his kind words, and I pay tribute to my predecessor, Baroness Sugg. People say to me, she was a very good minister, you know. Yes, I know exactly what they mean. Anyway, bi-mode trains. These are trains which run on, at the moment, on electricity and diesel, depending on electrification of the track. GWR is already running these trains, and they will be available on LNER on the 19th of May. But the noble Lord talks about hydrogen cell trains, and indeed this is a very important development. And it is the case that Abellio, who have the East Midlands franchise, will be trialling these trains from 2026. With all due respect to experts currently, I expect there to be improvements in these trains, and we will see how they work when they come into trial in 2026.
My Lords, it's very rare that I are in full agreement with Lord Scriven, but on this issue I am. And I'd like to welcome the noble lady and say I think we'll be saying the same about her when she leaves the post as we feel about Liz Sugg, which is that she was a damn good minister. Could I just point out that we've got some of the worst rolling stock, worst service on the most used line, and 160 miles from Sheffield to London. I use the Sheffield to London rather than London to Sheffield. With all the major urban areas in between. And not only do we need immediate action, but we need some real reassurance that we're going to get the kind of service that people deserve. Yeah.
I agree with much of what the noble Lord has said. We do recognise that there are challenges across our rail network, and that is why we are investing £48 billion over the next 5 years. This is the biggest modernisation of our rail network in over a century, and it represents over half of our national transport budget. But turning to the Midlands Mainline and the improvements there, I mean, that is going to benefit from £1.5 billion. There will be faster journeys, there will be more seats. But I think the important thing to recognise about this is that there will also be reduced disruption for passengers as these improvements come online.
Will careful consideration be given to heating on the trains to Sheffield for the sake of passengers who do not wear ties? Should we also not wish our excellent new Transport Minister well as she prepares to familiarise herself more fully with London's road network by taking part in a marathon?
I'd like to thank my noble friend, although I'm not sure of the heating benefits of a tie, having never worn one myself. But of course we must look about passenger comfort when they are travelling. It is the case that there are many factors that make for a good passenger experience. And a recent survey showed that the age and the quality of the trains is very, very important.
Could I too express a welcome to the noble lady, the Minister. I agree she will have a hard act to follow in the noble lady Baroness Sugg, but I'm sure that she will do so with flying colours. This government has a record second to none when it comes to scrapping or deferring major railway electrification schemes. Indeed, it now appears as though the future of HS2, which the noble lady the Minister mentioned, may become a political football in the quest for votes in the forthcoming Conservative Party leadership campaign. 2 days ago, the Environment Secretary, Mr Gove, told the 16-year-old climate change campaigner Greta Thunberg that she had been heard. If that statement wasn't merely a public relations platitude, why do the government and some of its leading members abandon or defer, and threaten to abandon or defer, major railway electrification projects in favour of the continuation of environmentally less friendly diesel or part diesel services?
Electrification is merely a form of propulsion for trains. It is not the be-all and end-all. It comes at cost, sometimes to local communities. If we use, for example, bi-mode trains, and when they're running in diesel mode, and this is modern diesel engines, there is no need for the intrusive wires that local communities have concerns about, and the masts, and it is the case that these trains have a less environmental impact than current trains. But turning to HS2, I believe that any thoughts of its demise are greatly exaggerated.
Funds, my lords, have already been spent on raising the bridges on the 22 miles which lie in the middle, lie in the middle of the 2 electrified sections of this line. Isn't it time to learn the lessons of Great Western electrification and accept that electrification can now be done for half the cost of that original project, and that bi-mode trains, as they currently stand, are heavier and costlier to run and maintain? Shouldn't the whole line now be electrified, my lords? Does the Minister accept this?
Yeah. I'm afraid to disappoint the noble lady, but the Minister does not accept that. We have looked at the costs and the benefits to the full electrification of this line, and we have concluded that in terms of passenger experience, the same benefits can be achieved by going a different way. The noble lady mentioned all of the bridges that have been, money has been spent on them, but that was not wasted money at all. It has improved the stability of those bridges, many of which were fairly old, and it also means that the passage of freight is easier.
Last year, transport ministers made a statement that all diesel propulsion would be removed from the network by 2040 in order to help the carbon reduction. These trains, on the noble Baroness's figures, and I welcome her, will only be 14 years old then. So what is going to happen to all these bi-modes which will have still a half-life when we're supposed to have cancelled all diesels?
Yeah. Ah, but my noble lord, the devil is in the detail. We have said that we will end diesel-only trains by 2040, and so bi-modes would not count. But I think it's also worth pointing out that the bi-modes that we expect to be used by Avalio under the East Midlands franchise are currently in design and development. There will be many new improvements, and we look forward to welcoming these trains.
Baroness Sheehan. My Lords, on behalf of my noble friend Baroness Sheehan, and at her request, I beg leave to ask the question standing in her name on the order paper.
The Government's view is that community sponsorship is a success thanks to the commitment and compassion of community groups directly welcoming and supporting resettled refugees in their communities. Since the scheme began in July 2016, 219 refugees have been resettled by community sponsor groups across the UK, and the number of community groups taking part continues to increase.
My Lords, allowing community groups to take responsibility for refugees based on the Canadian experience should be an economic, efficient and effective way of integrating refugees into society. And yet, as the noble Baroness has said, only 219 refugees have been resettled through this route, despite the Home Office providing £1 million in funding to provide training and support for these community groups. What's gone wrong?
I thought the noble lord was asking a very fair question till the last moment. I don't think anything has gone wrong. If one looks at the numbers, we're seeing a significant acceleration in the number of groups who are at different stages of the process. So there are about just over 50 groups who have gone through the whole community sponsorship process, but the work that's been done by Reset and other civil society groups around the country has addressed some of the blocks which meant that we got off to a slow start. So the application process has been significantly simplified. The training is now available on the Reset website, and groups are starting to share their successes. So there are now over 100 groups in the process of application, so I think we can be very confident to see a strong increase next year.
My Lords, many people who welcome the idea of community sponsorship have said to me that the scheme in this country is too bureaucratic. They just can't get it organised. Is there any way in which the government could look at this, cut through the red tape, so that local people can actually get on with it and provide the sponsorship support they want to do?
I thank the Noble Lord for his question. At the risk of repeating myself, I think if one looks at the numbers, there really has been a visible acceleration in the number of groups applying. It was just a handful in the first 18 months or so of the programme, and it is now accelerating quite quickly. But there is a good conversation going on between community groups, and so if he has specific examples, I'm happy to undertake to share those with those responsible.
My Lords, thank you. My Lords, it's good to hear that there's now an acceleration in the number of groups that are applying to be community sponsors. But as I understand it, it's only currently available to refugees who come through the various vulnerable people schemes. And it isn't being used at the moment as a model for those who apply for asylum in the UK and are successful in being granted refugee status. So could my noble friend outline whether there's any proposals in the future to make sure that this model is used for those who are granted refugee status in the UK? Otherwise, we do run the risk of a two-tier type system.
My noble friend makes a good point. There are currently no plans to expand this scheme to those granted refugee status through the in-country asylum process. But I would say, having spoken myself to a number of groups working in this area, that the line of support offered by community groups is not so tightly defined in terms of their original status, whether they were resettled or in-country applicants. So a lot of in-country asylum seekers and refugees are receiving support from their local community groups.
My Lords, I declare an interest as a trustee of Reset. Thanks to the work of Reset, the Global Refugee Sponsorship Initiative and others, community sponsorship is being taken up, as the Noble Minister said, now more rapidly, but also explored in communities across the world. This growth underlines the importance of measuring and learning from the outcomes on sponsored refugees and the sponsoring community. What data does the government collect, and will they make it public so community sponsorship can keep growing in number and quality?
I thank the Right Reverend Prelate for his question and commend him on his work in this area. The Home Office has commissioned an independent evaluation being carried out by the University of Birmingham, which is being published this summer. I can give early insight in a quote from the research which talks about the ability for refugees to count on emotional and practical support from a network of local people provides them with an excellent source of social capital that's critical for their integration. And it is obviously crucial that we work in the most intelligent way with very vulnerable refugees who have been selected for their vulnerability. And if the House will indulge me, I just thought it might be poignant to listen to a quote from the young Syrian refugee Amina Abu Keresh, forgive my pronunciation, who won the Betjeman Prize for poetry in her poem Lament for Syria, where she says, "Can anyone teach me how to make a homeland?" And let's hope that all these schemes can do just that.
My Lords, the citizenship and civic engagement
refugees find great barriers with their poor skills in English in finding jobs, getting housing and opening bank accounts. And yet, over the last 10 years, services of providing English language teaching to speakers of other languages have been cut by 55%. What plans does the government have to properly resource English language teaching and making it available to all of those who need it?
I thank the noble lady for her question. The government recently published the Integrated Communities Action Plan, which very specifically cites working both with government and civil society organisations in areas such as English as a second language, but also employment, mental health and other critical elements for integration.
Lord Storey.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the Government supports a strong and vibrant radio sector encompassing both the BBC, commercial and community radio, providing the widest possible choice for listeners. We acknowledge and value the role that local commercial stations play in terms of the provision of national and local news and other local content. Local programming and content requirements for holders of local analogue commercial radio licences are set by Ofcom, the independent regulator, under the existing legislative framework.
Yes, I'm not as sanguine as the Minister. He will know that large media players have been buying up local commercial radio stations and stripping out hundreds of hours of local programming for that programming to be made in London. We've seen the largest compulsory redundancies in commercial radio. We've seen DJs, engineers, producers lose their jobs. How are we going to maintain this local presence, not just in terms of news and travel and weather, but in proper programme making? Perhaps he could talk to Ofcom about being a bit more proactive, or maybe look at community radio and how community radio can be developed.
Well, of course, the noble lord is right. Community radio has seen a massive increase since 2010 when the current regime was brought in. Not only community radio, but also commercial radio. But according to Ofcom's guidelines, the large commercial radio groups will still need to have studios to originate programming within approved local areas, the approved local areas that were brought in under the last government. And they will not solely be able to originate content in London. So we are supporting local radio in a number of ways, and we're looking forward, for example, to introducing multiplexes soon for local DAB radio.
My Lords, I spent part of the recent break reading or rereading 7 Types of Ambiguity. And it occurred to me that Chapter 5 of that momentous piece of work dealt with statements in the briefing I received from the radio industry about what they want to put forward as their case. Through technology, stations have the ability to customize the news information they broadcast irrespective of where the presenters are based, which means we no longer have to keep the same number of stations open. These areas, these approved areas, can be a pretext behind which we hide the diminution of jobs, of locally based services, of immediate contact with local communities, and can produce and customize in faraway places with no reporters on site things that sound as if they're near. Would the government think that that was really what was behind the slackening of regulation affecting this sector of our life?
The basic issue is that commercial analogue radio faces an enormous challenge from digital services, both online and terrestrial. the changes that have been made by Ofcom to localness really were in accordance with listeners' views. Listeners, for example, only 17% of respondents to the survey in the consultation thought that locally based presenters were a factor which helped make their station feel local. They do have requirements to have content which is made in approved areas, which are local ITV areas. They do have to produce local news, either hourly or twice a day, and if they do it only twice a day, they have to produce more locally made content. The greatest factor for local radio, whether people listen to it, 72% of people, shock horror, listen to a local station because they play the music that the listeners like.
My Lords, I had the privilege as a very young man of contributing to the white paper which brought about commercial radio in this country, and I later applied, unsuccessfully as it happens, for a franchise. But my concerns were that at that time, quite rightly, the white paper, indeed the legislation of government, made it very clear that local component was very, very important indeed in the establishment of these stations, as had been the case with ITV and television stations previously. In both cases, we seem to have lost that, and we now end up with repeat transmitters everywhere and a lot of jobs lost. Would my noble friend not agree with me that the pattern which is still being sustained in the BBC local radio stations, which I believe is an enormously important one, is something that should be more reflected in future in commercial broadcasting?
The legislation that my noble friend refers to gave the definition of localness to Ofcom, who are the independent regulator, and they have, after 10 years, updated it to take account of modern listeners' views and also the increase in commercial radio on the digital space. But they still have to produce local news at regular intervals throughout the day, and they should broadcast at least 3 hours of locally made programming each weekday. If they don't provide local news hourly, they have to broadcast at least 6 hours of locally made programming each weekday.
My Lords, would the Minister not agree that if we're following on from the idea that a local music station is being listened to because people like the music, to make sure it's local would be doing something like having a local guide to where live music is taking place? You can't fake that from London, and it would ensure they had people on the ground. Would that not be a model for going forward?
That's exactly why, as I just said, they have to have locally made content.
Berkeley.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, I feel sure that the whole House will recognise the importance of this question and endorse that we are the current custodians of this remarkable building and have a duty to do all that we can to pass it safely on to future generations. My Lords, that said, may I say that there are automatic smoke detection systems in most of the main roof spaces. I should do this more often, shouldn't I? There are more automatic smoke detection devices in most of the roof spaces across the palace, and coverage of the remaining spaces will be completed during December 2019. There are no automatic extinguishing no automatic system for extinguishing fires in the roof space of the palace. But the roof space is compartmentalised in order to prevent the spread of fire, and of course the fire safety team regularly patrol the palace.
I'm very grateful to the noble lord for that comprehensive reply. I mean, we all love this place, and when I saw the Notre Dame going up in smoke a week or so ago, my first thoughts were it could happen to us here. I'm really pleased that we were told that the smoke detectors are in most of the places up in the roof, and it'll be completed by the end of this year, I think the Minister said. So my question really is, when smoke is detected, how do you put the fire out? Because we've seen from the initial reports at Notre Dame that within less than half an hour between smoke being found, there was an inferno up there. And it seemed to me that the only way they could put it out was to jets of water, cannons of water landing on the roof. And of course that doesn't work because the roof's designed to keep the water out until it all falls down and causes a fire downstairs. So could we look at the way of getting some more extinguishing medium up there to deal with such fires if and when they occur, which we hope they won't, obviously?
Well, my lords, this is a very important question, and of course we are anxious to learn lessons from Notre Dame, as we have from other heritage buildings, because we should be clear that all heritage buildings carry with it very serious fire risk potential. The first thing, my lords, is that in this building there is an assumption that if a smoke detector is activated, that it has to be inspected immediately. There is no assumption that it is a false alarm. And secondly, the whole procedure within the building is to tackle fire from within rather than to wait till it goes up, because the noble lord is quite right. When it goes up, then it raises very serious issues, not only about getting water up there, and there are systems to do that, but also because it means that the fire has taken really serious control.
The noble Lord Chairman, accept that the earlier we can bring forward the decanting, the better for the safety of the building. And would he therefore ensure that we look very carefully at Sir Michael Hopkins' realistic proposal for putting the chamber of the other place in Portcullis House, which Sir Michael himself was the architect of, and if we had, in addition, a temporary structure on Embankment Gardens, the two chambers could be moved far more quickly than under the current proposals.
Well, noble lords will know about the arrangements for looking at the R&R programme and taking that forward. All that I can add at this stage is to say that I think for all of us, the fire at Notre Dame ought to be a spur to get on and move to the implementation of the R&R programme, which has a well-developed system in place, and I feel sure that we will be hearing more about it in due course.
My lords,
I'm really pleased to hear the Lord Senior Deputy Speaker saying that the fire service inside the palace do not accept the concept of a false alarm. That's very reassuring, and that wasn't what happened in Notre Dame. And I wonder if the House would join me in our thanks to the excellent team of fire safety officers who patrol the palace 24 hours a day. One of the problems in Notre Dame was the lack of sprinklers. And recently, in renovations in New York, St Patrick's Cathedral has installed sprinklers, and they've also painted old beams with fire retardant. What plans are currently underway for us to do that here at the Palace of Westminster to provide that extra security?
Yes, my lords, a huge amount of work has been undertaken during the past 3 years, and I'll not rehearse it all, but that includes more than 700 fire doors, improving the compartmental arrangements within the building, and improving the ways of getting people out of the building should there be a threat of fire. But there is more to be done. We have managed to get a fire sprinkle arrangement in the basement, which is probably the most vulnerable area of the building, and we will continue with the programme in so many different ways. I'll not go through it all, but there is a substantial work programme already in place.
My lords, can I say first of all thank you for... I beg your pardon. Sorry.
My lords, I wonder if I could ask the noble lord, the chairman of the Services Committee, whether he'd also read the press reports that I had suggested that hot works were at the root cause of the fire at Notre Dame. And could he give the House some assurances that the hot works procedures that have followed in this House are of the very safest type, and in particular that workmen remain on site at least 2 hours after the hot works have ceased?
My lords, I'm extremely grateful for that question because, as colleagues will know, there are a large number of contractors on the site all of the time, And so the fire officer has a procedure with all of the contractors that they must ensure that they comply with the most rigorous standards, which include the kind of detail that the Noble Earl has referred to. But, my lords, we should never be complacent about this. We must go on learning the lessons, and especially in this special building.
My Lords, I'm grateful for the very informative answer that the Minister gave. I'm sure we're all glad that in the roofing section there are smoke alarms. I have to say I was surprised, indeed shocked, that in such a vulnerable area to conflagration there is no sprinkler system. Can he explain why there is no sprinkler system? I mean, I'm rather sceptical about the argument that compartmentalisation is the answer to the vulnerability. That was the case in the Titanic.
My Lords, this is a very serious matter. It is a very precious roof space in Westminster Hall, as we know, and I'm pleased to report that we have now managed to get in place an alarm system in that building. The R&R programme is going to have to address a whole range of issues, and this will be one of the key issues that will need to be addressed. But, my Lords, we need to be clear that it will not be a simple matter to put a sprinkler system in that part of the building.
Has my noble friend... Order.